In this demonstration, I'm going to show you how, using Kapow's technologies, we can move data in an automated way from Microsoft Excel into an SAP Netweaver portal and back, using techniques that took me less than an hour to employ, which if you tried to do using traditional methods might instead take days or weeks. There are two cases we're going to look at today to show this. In the first, I utilized Kapow to read customer data from a spreadsheet and use this data to create a new customer record in the Netweaver portal instance. In the second example, I used Kapow in a similar way to read from a spreadsheet to create new invoice records in SAP. Quite powerfully, each of these examples took me less than an hour to build a complete automated solution using Kapow. And when I say complete automated solution, I mean that I've created something using Kapow that won't just work one time. It's not just a one-time load, but instead can be leveraged moving forward in a generic, repeatable way. At a high level, how do you do this with Kapow? To solve the two problems I've outlined here, I used Kapow Technologies' product to create an automated entity called a robot to complete this integration. You're now looking at a small robot that I just built in Kapow's RoboMaker user interface. If you look at the top of the user interface where my mouse cursor is moving right now, this is where you create a series of steps in what you can think of as something like a flowchart that the robot will mostly follow from left to right. In the middle is a browser view, which makes it extremely simple to create these steps. In this robot, at the beginning, we've added a load page step to load the front page of our Netweaver portal in the browser view. The next step, which is selected, then enters the login ID, which could be hard-coded in here or read from some other source. And then when I step past that step, notice that the login ID has been entered onto the page by Kapow and RoboMaker. The same then happens with the password field. When we click past that step, it gets entered as well. And then finally, the robot logs into the portal by clicking on the login button. The processes or robots that you create using Kapow are not fragile scripts. What you create using Kapow are robust interfaces that are resilient to changes on the target system, in this case our Netweaver portal, so that if, for example, fields are moved around on the page, the robot that we created won't break. So moving back to the login, if they move this user ID field down to the bottom of the page tomorrow, this robot that we wrote today is not going to break on that step. This robot can also obviously grab results back from the web and take different execution paths or branches in the flow based on what the robot sees on the page. I use these same sorts of steps and principles to build the larger completed robots for today's demonstration. Before looking at these robots, let's look at the input spreadsheet that serves as our source data used by our first robot to create a customer in the Netweaver portal. Switching to Excel now. Here we see a spreadsheet with some customer data in it. It's not too exciting. It's a line item with customer information. Our objective, though, is to create the automated process to move data from spreadsheets like this, whether it's one line or multiple lines worth of customers, into SAP Netweaver, creating new customer records from that. So to do that, I created a working robot, which looks a lot like the one that we just looked at, but it's just much longer. So you can see here a very linear process where we move through to grab the data from the spreadsheet and then log into the Netweaver portal and then enter the data very much like a human being would do. So if we step back into this robot a little bit, this is the point where it logged in, but if we step back a little bit earlier in the robot, you'll see that in the browser view here, you'll actually have that spreadsheet that we were just looking at in Excel. So Kapow works well with various formats in this browser view, including data from Excel, XML data from web services calls. You can grab data, of course, back from databases. Just so many different sources that you can grab data from to feed into other systems. Excel is just what we're using in this case. So I completed this robot in less than an hour, and if we go to the end, the robot actually clicks on Save in the Netweaver portal after it's entered all of the customer data that we retrieved from the spreadsheet. And I won't obviously have time to go through all the steps that we took to do that, but it's the similar concept that I was showing you with what we did in the login. Let's switch to Excel again for the second example, where in this case we're creating a new invoice, where we want to create a new invoice in the SAP Netweaver portal from data in Excel. And in this case we have some basic invoice data in this Excel spreadsheet, but here we have multiple line items, and essentially we build our robot that I'm going to show you in a second to handle n number of line items in this invoice. So whether there be one or 100 or 150 or whatever, the robot's going to work generically with the multiple number of line items and input those multiple line items into SAP when we're creating the invoice. So that's very powerful because obviously you want your data to be able to be dynamic. And in cases where you sort of have a master detail kind of data setup like you do in this case with a sort of the generic invoice data and then the individual line items, it's important to be able to handle that. What Kapow does, and again we have another robot that I created, looks very similar to the last one, about the same size, very linear. I'm scrolling through the steps right now. Except in this case we have a loop at the end because we need to do what I suggested and iterate through the line items in the invoice. And so that's what this robot does until it reaches the end where we save the document in the Netweaver portal and are able to get that result back. So another very similar robot that looks much the same as the last. Again, creating a data pipe between Excel and the Netweaver portal back and forth. So to conclude, moving data from Excel to SAP Netweaver is a very specific use case. But Kapow solves a more general problem of moving data contained in one environment to another with special emphasis and ability around leveraging the front ends of web applications. Today's business applications are typically shared and web-based, whether they're deployed on-premise or in the cloud. And Kapow allows you to leverage the web interface of these large systems to accomplish your system integration goals. What are the alternatives to using Kapow? I mean, these are well known. You can use existing SOA tools, or you can write your own hard-coded, code in a programming language. Either way, you're going to have to hit the database directly of the systems that you're integrating if a database is involved, and that's even if you have access to such a database. Or you're going to have to learn application-specific APIs. I mean, in the case of SAP, you have to learn their BAPIs in order to interface with their system. Even if you have an expert that knows that kind of stuff, which can be very high priced because it's really specialized, hand-coding such solutions can take person months to do. So it's a generally pretty expensive and time-consuming effort to do this kind of work. And I think, we've already emphasized that with Kapow, the alternative is to leverage the web interface of the front ends of web applications. Most modern business applications have one, and you can really take advantage of all the work that the software company that wrote that application, all the work that went into building that front end, essentially you leverage with Kapow. So you have built-in validation, and really it allows you to create a built-in API or make use of their built-in user interface as an API to really make the process a lot faster. So that's the demonstration, using Kapow in this case to integrate Excel with SAP's Netweaver portal.